And good afternoon, Dean Haller. Thank you very much for being with us today. Dean is the founder of livelikebenjo.org and is doing shallow water blackout awareness and prevention. Dean, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Randall. Appreciate you having me.
We're very happy to have you here today. Dean, if you don't mind telling us how you got started with this, I'd really appreciate your story.
Well, on August 1st of 2014, we received a phone call that my son had drowned in the Bahamas. He had just completed kind of a childhood dream, having sailed from Lake Champlain in Vermont all the way to the Bahamas. And he was down there. He'd been there for about a week before he drowned. And he and his first mate, Matt, had been spearfishing all day on August 1st. It was opening day of spearfishing. And spearfished, had a great catch, brought it back to his sailboat, which was docked in a marina. They had dinner, and then Benjo, as we affectionately call him, his name's Benjamin, but Benjo decided he wanted to go back and practice breath holding so he could stay underwater longer the following day. And he did. Unfortunately, what caused his death is called shallow water blackout, and he drowned in 7 feet of water.
I'm very sorry to hear that, Dean. So, how did you find out about it?
We received a phone call. Matt called my daughter, and excuse me, pretty choked up, obviously.
Yeah.
All he could basically say was, "I hate to tell you this, but
yeah,
Benjo drowned earlier this evening."
I can't imagine having gotten that phone call. I'm very sorry about that.
Not a phone call any parent wants to get, Randall. I can tell you.
Definitely not. I followed Benjo online on Facebook when he was making his journey all the way down from Vermont down to NASA, and I really enjoyed watching his experience, and I felt like I was right there with him, so it was really fun to do that. Can you please tell us about your new foundation, livelikebenjo.org, and what you're doing with that?
Yeah, excuse me, Randall. The primary mission of the Live Like Benjo Foundation is to raise awareness about shallow water blackout and hopefully prevent deaths and prevent other families from having to go through the same thing. So we are a 501c3. I founded it shortly after Benjo died, and we've now been in existence for just shortly under 2 years. We do awareness all over New England. We focus primarily on Vermont right now, but we make presentations about what causes shallow water blackout, how it can be presented. And we also raise funds for scholarships to provide for at-risk children to have sailing lessons and adventures on Lake Champlain who otherwise would not have that opportunity. Because Benjo loved sailing so much, we also wanted to give something back to the community. So awareness and then providing sailing lessons for underprivileged children.
So it's awareness, prevention, and a scholarship.
Correct.
Oh, that's wonderful, and that's great. So, while we've got you here, educate us. Tell us how does someone get shallow water blackout, and what can someone do to prevent it?
Okay, shallow water blackout is caused by a lack of the sufficient amount of carbon dioxide in the body to trigger the brain that it's time to breathe. In other words, everybody has a certain threshold of carbon dioxide in it. And when you hold your breath, that carbon dioxide builds up. And once it reaches that threshold, it sends a signal to the brain automatically that it's time to breathe.
Yeah.
When you are practicing breath holding, or what's called hypoxic training, what you do typically, and free divers do it, anybody that basically wants to stay underwater longer, they attempt to do this. They will hyperventilate, and then they hold their breath, and they'll go underwater. The hyperventilation, unfortunately, that takes the carbon dioxide well below the threshold. And when you're holding your breath, it doesn't build up enough to exceed the threshold and send a signal to the brain that it's time to breathe. When that happens, the brain will pass out due to a lack of fresh oxygen. And once that happens, then the next natural reaction of the body is to take a breath. And when you do that underwater, obviously, tragic can occur.
That's terrible. Yeah, as long as I've been swimming, I've been practicing breath holding, and seeing how long you can stay underwater. It's always been, I think, as long as there's been water, I think humans have been doing that, and so I don't think that's going to go away. So what do we do to prevent people from losing their life or getting injured?
Well, there are a couple of things that we advocate. Number one, never swim alone. One of the things that we found out that Benjo did was he was probably doing this by himself, or if his buddy was with him, he came up without notifying Ben. You never do anything like this unless you have a team or a buddy like you do in scuba diving.
Right.
Another thing is don't play breath holding games. It's very common for children to do that. I did it. We had a pool when I was young, and we would see how many laps we could swim underwater before coming up. Quite often, we might even be doing that after we were running around out in the yard playing. Then we'd jump in the pool. Well, that exercise has the same effect as hyperventilation. You're expelling air rapidly, so you've lowered your carbon dioxide threshold without even knowing it, without attempting it through the hyperventilation process. Another thing is never ignore the urge to breathe. If you're underwater and you get that urge to breathe, don't try and exceed it. Don't try and suppress it. When it's time for you to come up and breathe, then come up and breathe. But the main thing, Randall, that we advocate against is the prolonged breath holding without proper supervision. Free divers are going to do it. Spearfishers are going to do it. You hold your breath when you're swimming,
but just don't do it alone.
Don't do it alone, and know what you're doing. My son was an accomplished scuba diver. He had and an instructor.
Your son was an athlete.
He was an athlete. He was an absolute athlete. He was a championship skier. The list was long. But even with all that experience, he didn't know about the negative results of hyperventilation and prolonged breath holding. And that's what we want to make people aware of, is don't do it alone, don't suppress the urge, and don't swim alone.
Where can people get a hold of you? How can they look at your information?
We have a website, Randall. It's livelikebenjo.org.
Livelikebenjo.org. That's wonderful, Dean. Thank you very much. Very sorry about your loss with your son, and I know that anyone that knows you knows Benjo is very dear to their heart as well. So from FitLife, thank you very much for being on our show today. It's a pleasure. I love you and your family dearly, and we'll see you soon, Dean.
Thanks, Randall. I appreciate this very much.